Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Monday night, another Parsha share. It's a very interesting question that a lot of people are not even aware of. Something which is really thrown into our face as a question. After the Akedah, last week's Parsha, we read about the Akedah. So it says after, Yitzchak's life was spared and the animal was sacrificed, it says Avram came back to the lads and they went together to Beersheba. V'yeshev Avram be'Beersheba. And Avram Avinu dwelled in Beersheba. Now what's interesting is there was a guy called Yitzchak. It doesn't speak about him. Not only that, the beginning of this week's Parsha that we're learning now, the pasuk says, "Vayavei Avraham lisped l'Sara v'livkeisa." Avraham Avinu came to mourn for Sarah. Now, the obvious question, where was Yitzchak? Why didn't his mother died? Why didn't Yitzchak come? It emphasizes Avraham came to mourn. It seemed that Yitzchak, who is now 37 years old, right after the Akedah, okay, he didn't come to mourn his mother. He didn't come to the funeral. I mean, what's going on over here? So one of the more interesting answers that answers a lot of questions later on in next week's Parsha that we'll talk about in next week's Parsha, Mirz Hashem, is it says in Asora Maimoris, which is an earlier sefer, and the Rivo, as Rishon brings it down also, that Yitzchak, after the Akedah, went to Gan Eden. He checked out for 3 years. He went to Gan Eden, right, straight from the Akedah, and therefore Avram went to Beersheba. Yitzchak wasn't with him. Yitzchak went straight from the Akedah to Gan Eden. How, what, when, where? Don't ask me. But that's what it says. He went to Gan Eden. And therefore that's explained a few things. Number one, in this Parsha, all the way at the end, when Yitzchak went out into the field, okay, Eliezer comes back with Rivka, and the whole story, and then it says the Yitzchak went out to talk in the field, Nasuach Basada, to talk in the field, and she said to him, "Who's that?" So she said, "Hu Adeni is my master." So it's funny, these Mepharshim say that Yitzchak was coming down from the Sada's Gan Eden, Sada Sheberache Hashem, and that's why when Yaakov came in to steal the bracha Sameis, not to take the bracha Sameis, and Yitzchak said, "Rei reach b'ni kereach hasada sheberachi Hashem." I recognize the smell. Rashi says Gan Eden. How did Yitzchak know how Gan Eden smelled? Because Yitzchak was in Gan Eden for 3 years, and that explains a lot of discrepancies in Parshas told us that we'll get to a Mirz Hashem next week. But the bottom line is that Yitzchak wasn't present when his mother passed away. He wasn't in the world. He was in Gan Eden. Okay, next. The Parsha is called Chayei. We know Rab Meir in the Gemara, Medayik Bishma, the name of something brings out the whole essence of the person, of the name, whatever it's a name of. Chayei literally means it was the life of Sarah. If you look in the whole Parsha, it speaks, number one, about her dying, about her burial, and then because Avram was old, he went to look for a shidduch for Yitzchak. And how does this get to Chayei? There's not one mention about her life. And yet the Parsha is called Chayei, the life of Sarah. How does that get into the picture? How does the name Chayei is the name of a Parsha that talks all about her passing? But the answer is, by tzaddikim, their life is not the physical now life. In other words, you know the famous Gemara in Tainus that says, Yaakov Avinu lemes, Yaakov Avinu didn't pass away. Why didn't Yaakov Avinu pass away? So the Gemara says his children are alive. He's alive. Mazar b'chaim, afu b'chaim. Because by a tzaddik, it's not their life that they live here. It's the impression and what they left to the world. That is their life. When Sarah gave birth to a Yitzchak, and there was a shidduch between Eliezer. Eliezer went to get a shidduch between Yitzchak and Rivka. That's all Sarah is doing. Who basically made Yitzchak the tzaddik what he was more Sarah than Avraham. In last week's Parsha, when Yishmael was starting up with Yitzchak, Sarah went to Avraham and said, get rid of him. He didn't want to. But Sarah was interested in the chinuch of the child. So we're talking about the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka that we're going to get into much more details about the importance of the shidduch and Yitzchak and Rivka. We're talking about her accomplishments. That's her accomplishments in the world of Yitzchak. And not only that, but even the inyan of Sarah means shurara. Shurara means leadership, being a sar, an officer, a leader. Sarah, even though at the end of the Parsha it speaks about Yishmael, Sarah was controlling Yishmael too. She had control. She told Avram, he's getting in the way, take care of him, send him away. So everything in the Parsha is still offshoots of Sarah's life in this world and how she left over, after she passed away, she left over the imprint, the influence, and the power that she left into the world. Now we find this even more. When Eliezer came back with Rivka, okay? So it says, Vayeviyeha, Pasuk says after they met, he met Rivka in the field. He says, Vayeviyeha Yitzchak ohela Sarah iman. He brought Rivka back to Sarah's tent, right before Shishi in Parakhov Dalit Pasuk Samach Zayin. Okay, right? He brought back Sarah to the tent, Rivka to the tent of Sarah. So Rashi says, what does it mean? Sarah imay? Sarah died already. This is a number of years after Sarah passed away. But Rashi says it became a tent again like Sarah. And Rashi quotes from the Medrash, it's a famous Rashi, a famous Medrash. As long as Sarah was alive, she had three things happening in her home. Rashi says, number one, when Sarah ben Shlich, when Sarah lit the Shabbos candles, it lit miraculously from week to week. She lit it Friday, it lasted until the next Friday. Then the candles either went out or she put them out to relight the Shabbos candles. It's a miracle in the candles. Secondly, bracha mitzuya be'isa. There was a bracha in the dough. What does that mean, a bracha in the dough? When she made dough, there was a bountiful amount, and it was good. And a bracha, like women know, you have a bracha in the cooking and baking. And the third thing was anon kosher ala hoil. There was a cloud constantly over Sarah's tent. So the pasuk said, Rashi says, Ume shemes, when Sarah died, Pascha, all these three miracles stopped. Ukshabasa Rivka, when Rivka came now into it revived itself. What's interesting, by the way, even after Sarah passed away, Avraham Avinu had to ben shlich. Halachically, if there's no wife, the husband has to ben shlich. So obviously, Avraham Avinu ben shlich. Yeah, we don't find that in Avraham Avinu's candle lighting it lasted a week, or there was a bracha that this was Sarah's uniqueness. So now Yitzchak is educated to such an extent that he's having Rivka now. So this is Chayei Sarah. This is the impact, influence that Sarah had, to the extent that even Rivka, as we'll soon learn, who grew up amongst the thorn bushes, was able to come back to a tent and perform all those miracles. And while we're on this topic, I'm going to skip a little bit. But these are the three. What happens? These three miracles happen. There was a light from Shabbos to Shabbos, the bracha in the dough, and there's a cloud over the tent. So it's known, the Rebbe explains this in many sichos, that these are the three mitzvahs that belong to women. Ner Shabbos, Chala, which is the mitzvah of kashrus, and Taras Mishpacha. But we learned many times, this is the acronym of Chana, Ches is Chala, Nun is Nida, and Hey is Adlokas Haneres. Where do we find these things? By Sora Imenu, and then again by Rivka Imenu. There was a candle, she ben shlicht, it lasted a whole week. That's a miracle. Who accomplished that? Sora and then Rivka. There was a bracha Metzuya Be'isa represents the concept of kashrus, which is the woman's responsibility in the home, generally speaking. Who accomplished that? A bracha in the kashrus, Sora and then Rivka. Anon kosher Allah, the cloud over the tent represents family purity, which affects the whole house. So, and how old was Rivka? According to Rashi, she was 3 years old. According to Rashi, Taisus argues, Taisus says she was 12. Taisus in Daskin Bala, Taisus in the Gemara argues on Rashi. But according to Rashi, and this is, so to speak, the accepted opinion universally, that Rivka was 3 years old when she married Yitzchak. She wasn't obligated in mitzvahs. Yet this little girl, 3 years old, ben shlicht, she made sure Taras and Mishpach after she got married, she dealt with the kashrut. She wasn't even a bas mitzvah yet. Nevertheless, this is, when the Rebbe came out, the single girl, she ben shlicht, this is one of the things that Rebbe quoted, that Rivka Imenu, at the age of 3, was already benching licht every Shabbos. So therefore, this is Chayei Sarah. This is the life of Sarah, because this is the impact that Sarah had not only when she lived, but the main impact is when she died. Then you see retroactively that the person's life was a life. Like it says by Yaakov, if his children are alive, meaning he instilled within them the continuity of Yaakov Avinu, so the Yaakov Avinu is still alive. Okay. Another thing, right after he buried Sarah, by the way, it's a very interesting thing. Avram Avinu paid Arba Meir shekel kesef, a lot of money. Okay? So there's a sefer called Paneach Roza. Paneach Roza was a Rishon. And that brings down in an earlier Sikha. This Paneach Roza was a Rishon. And he says like this: why did Avram Avinu buy Ma'arat HaMachpelah for such a crazy price? He could have, like a Jew does, he could have handled, he could have looked for a Mitzvah. Why did Avram Avinu pay 400? What's the cheshbon 400 shekel kesef? And he explains like this: in Parsha's B'chukaisai, there's a din of redeeming fields. And there's a din of a base cord. I'm not going into all those dinim of B'chukaisai, but there's a base cord. A base cord's measurement is 7,500 square amas. Okay, it's 75,000. 75,000 square amas is a base cord. Now, the Torah says, how much money do you need to redeem for that base cord? 50 shekel kesef. 50. Avram Avinu paid 400 is 8 times 50. Correct? 400 is 8 times 50. According to the cheshbon, that one base cord is 75,000 square cubits. So 8 times that is 600,000 cubits. So Paneach Roza says, very interestingly, that when by Avram Avinu buying Ma'arat HaMachpelah for 400 shekel kesef, he basically bought an amma by an amma, a cubit by a cubit, For every single Jew, he bought a piece of land in Eretz Yisrael. For the 600,000 Jews that left Egypt, the general number of Jews, and then it was inherited to their children. But Avraham Avinu paid 400 shekel kesef to be able to consider it. He bought for 600,000 people a square amma in Eretz Yisrael. And there's another interesting thing. Avraham Avinu had a right to take it for free. God gave him the land. And Ephraim said, yeah, really, it's yours. Avraham Avinu said, no, I want to pay for it. We find another interesting thing in history. David HaMelech bought Yerushalayim from Aravna. He bought it. Why did he have to buy Yerushalayim? It belonged to the Jews. It was Eretz Yisrael. It belongs to the Jews. So the Mefarshim explain that two things, Ma'arat HaMachpelah and Kever Shechem also, Kever Yosef and Shechem, the Jews also paid. But the tzaddikim wanted, the patriarchs wanted, that Yerushalayim should not be questionable. Who owns it? David HaMelech bought it with cash. Who owns Ma'arat HaMachpelah? Avraham Avinu bought it with cash, 400 shekel kesef. So even though legally it was ours, but they said, you know what? We don't want any problems later on in history, even though now we do have problems with them. But nevertheless, this is what they did. So they actually bought, Avraham Avinu actually bought for every single Jew an amma by an amma in Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Next, it says like this: Vavram Zakein Baba Yamin. Right after he buried Sarah, Vavram Zakein Baba Yamin. Avram Avinu became old, coming in days. Hashem Beirachas Avram Bakel. Hashem blessed everybody, Avram with everything. Rashi says, what does Bakel mean? With the son. Because Kel is Chof Lamed, is a nun, 50, and Ben. So Bakel means Ben. So meaning he was given Yitzchak, and now he had to find a Meshidach. There's a medrash that says Avram Avinu had a daughter whose name was Bakel. Hashem Beirachas Avram Bakel. He had a daughter Bakel. Okay, but let's understand this. There's a very interesting Gemara from Metzia. The Gemara says, Ad Avram lahaisa zikna. Until Avram Avinu, that's over 2,000 years, 2,400 years. Okay, but over 2,000 years. No, it's 2,000 years. Avram Avinu, there was no aging. There was no aging. The way you grew up as a mature adult, you stayed like that. Man and woman stayed like that until they died. There was no aging. The Gemara says Avram Avinu, because Yitzchak, we'll see in next week's Parsha, Yitzchak ben Avram Helid Yitzchak, the redundancy. So Rashi quotes, because people were saying that Sarah couldn't get pregnant from Avram, but she got pregnant from Avimelech in last week's Parsha. So what did Hashem do? Hashem made Avram and Yitzchak look exactly alike. Okay, identical. Avram and Yitzchak, father and son, looked identical. The problem was nobody would know who's Avram and nobody would know who's Yitzchak. So Avram Avinu davened to Hashem, and where he asked for aging. I guess he wanted to give parnasa to all those creams and everything, surgeries and Botoxes, and that they wanted to give everybody parnasa. So Avram Avinu, so it says Avram Zakein. The Gemara says Ma'ad Avram lahaisa zikna. Until Avram Avinu was born, there was no age. Until this time, there was no aging. Hashem wanted people to differentiate between who is Yitzchak and who is Avram. Hashem made it. Then the Gemara over there continues, not relevant here, it's later on in Chumash. It says in Parsha Vayechi that Ine Avicha Chayla, Yosef was told your father was sick, and he brought Menashe and Ephraim to get blessed. So the Gemara says in Bab Metzia, Ad Yaakov Avinu lahaisa chulsha, the Chayla. There was no illness until Yaakov Avinu. The first person in history since creation to be sick was Yaakov Avinu. Why did Yaakov Avinu get sick? Yaakov Avinu said to Hashem, I want to know before I die, because I want to bless my children. So Hashem let him know that you were sick, and you're very sick, and that then he passed away. So until Yaakov Avinu, there was no illness. How did people die until Yaakov Avinu? So we know a person, when his time came to go, he sneezed, the neshama goes in. Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim. Hashem blew into Adam Rishon's nostril the neshama. So then, when you blow, you sneeze, the neshama came out, the person died, and they were buried. There was no suffering, there was no illness, no nothing. Yaakov Avinu wanted to be able to bless his children. He says to Hashem, give me a sign. So Hashem gave him the sign. Okay. Coming back to Avram Avinu. So Avram Zakeh means Avram was old. Baba Yamim, coming in days. It's redundant. If he's old, he's coming in days. If he's coming in days, he's old. So what does it mean by Avram Zakeh Baba Yamim? So in the Zohar it says, what does it mean by Avram Zakeh Baba Yamim? Not only was he old, every day of his life was accounted for. Every day of his life was accounted for. And therefore the Zohar says, Avram Zakeh, it's not repetitious. Avram Zakeh and Avram was old. Baba Yamim. And also every day was a full. You could be old. You could live 90, 100, 120. You could have wasted half your life. Avram Zakeh, Baba Yamim. Avram Avinu, not only was he old, every day of his life. By the way, this is another interesting thing at the beginning of the Parsha. It says, Sarah lived 127 years. Okay? So in the Medrash, there's a story. Rabbi Akiva was once giving a class. This is a lesson that all rabbis should not feel bad. Rabbi Akiva was teaching a class, and the students fell asleep. Imagine Rabbi Akiva's class, the Talmidim fell asleep. So Rabbi Akiva said to them the following. Do you know why Sarah ruled 120, Esther, I'm sorry. Why Esther ruled 127 countries? You know why? Because Achashverosh ruled 127 countries. Esther was the queen. He said to the students, you know why Esther ruled 127 countries? Because Sarah lived 127 years. So let the daughter of one who lived 127 years come and rule 127 countries. And the Medrash says the students woke up. Question is, what does it have to do with price of eggs in China? What does it have to do with them waking up? So Mefarshim explain a very beautiful lesson. Sarah lived 127 years, and therefore Esther ruled 127 full countries. If Sarah would have wasted a year of her life, Esther would have only ruled 126 countries. In other words, Rabbi Akiva is telling the students, Sarah Imenu lived a full life, like Avraham Avinu here, Baba Yomer. Every second of her life was utilized to the fullest. Because if Sarah wasted a minute, she would have had one city less. A year, one country less. So Rabbi Akiva is telling his students, why are you guys wasting away your life? You're wasting away your life sleeping. So then they got the message, so they woke up. They realized, why are we sleeping away our life? So therefore, so the same thing over here. Avram Zakeh Baba Yamim means every day of his life was complete. But let's take it a little bit deeper. Avram Zakeh, the Gemara says, what is a Zakeh? Mi shekana chachma. One who acquires chachma. A Zakeh doesn't mean passport years. A Zakeh means one who is wise, wisdom. Zeh shekana chachma. Zakeh is zeh kana and it's chachma. But sometimes a person could be intellectual, but he'll segregate himself from the world. He'll be different. He'll be away from the world. Avram's uniqueness was not only was Avram zaken, not only was Avram acquiring chachma, but ba bayamim, he brought it into the days. Yamim means the 6 spheres, which created the world. So ba bayamim means not only that was Avram Avinu brilliant, but Avram Avinu understood I have to influence others. And that's what it means, ba bayamim. It's not redundant. It's 2 separate issues. Like the Zohar said, Hitaka utilized every minute. But how did he utilize every minute? Avram Avinu didn't stay in the yeshiva. He went out. Vayikra b'shem Hashem kel olam. He called out godliness into the world. So what was Avram Avinu's uniqueness? Every day was complete. Every day of his life was complete. But now you can ask a very important question. How old was Avram Avinu when he recognized Hashem? So everybody knows the famous answer is Ekev Asher Shama Avram B'Kaili. The pasuk says, simply means because Avram listened to my voice. So it says Ekev Ayin Kuf Beis is 172. Avram Avinu passed away at 175. So the pasuk says, how many years did Avram Avinu follow Hashem? Ekev Asher Shama Avram B'Kaili. Avram listened to my voice for 172 years. There's an argument in Rambam and Ravid. One opinion says Avram hiked his beta when he was 40. Not 3 years old, 40 years old. Another opinion says he was 48 when he recognized Hashem. So already the Mefarshim explain they're not arguing because how old was he? So it was obviously different stages that Avram Avinu went through recognizing Hashem. When he was 3 years old, he began the recognition of Hashem. When he was 40, Ben Arboim Labina, 40 years of understanding, he had a greater recognition of Hashem. And 48, he had the ultimate recognition of Hashem. But the question is, how could we say Avram Avinu's every day of his life was utilized to the fullest in serving Hashem, when for 3 years, or 40 years, or 48 years, he didn't serve Hashem? So how can we say, Ba Bayamim, that every day of his life was utilized completely? Then it wasn't. It's minus 3 years, or 40 years, or 48 years. What do you mean, Ba Bayamim, every day of his life was complete? It's not true. Until he recognized Hashem, it wasn't complete. The explanation is like this. There's a part that says, Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'Kav. A tzaddik falls down 7 times and stands up. That means in Avedas Hashem, in serving Hashem, there's ups and downs. But it's all part of the process. Avram Avinu had Lech Lecha, right away, Vayeded Avram Mitzrayim, we discussed in Parshas Lech Lecha, that even the descent into Egypt is Lech Lecha. Because when you go down in order to go up, or when you're searching to come to the ultimate truth, the searching is part of the process. It's actually part of the process. So what the pasuk is saying is that Avram Avinu, Avram Zaken Baba Yamim, even the years that he didn't recognize Hashem yet, but he was in the process of searching for Hashem. That process of searching makes Ba Bayamim, that every day, even those years when he didn't serve Hashem yet, he didn't find Hashem yet, were also part of the process, also Ba Bayamim. We found a similar thing when the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, there's something called a Beinin. A Beini is a guy that never sins, not in thought, not speech, and action. Why is he not a tzaddik? Because he still has a Yetzer Hara. He has a very powerful Yetzer Hara. It gets stronger with age, but nevertheless, the second evil thought comes, he throws it out. Same thing with speech and action, he throws it out. But the question is, and the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says when he speaks about a Bein, he says he never sinned and never will sin. The question, that means a guy sins once in his life, he's finished with a Beinani process. He can never be a Beinani because he sinned once. The answer is no, the Rebbe explains. The Beinani now is on a level, at the present level, he's on a level that he would have never sinned. What happened in the past is part of the process. That's part of the process of becoming a Beinani. But now that the person's Beinani, the Alter Rebbe says the expression, he never sinned. What do you mean never sinned? He did sin. But that was a part of the process to become a Beinani. And right now in his present level, he would never sin, not in thought, speech, or action. So therefore he's a Beinani in the past also. And the same thing is the explanation with Avram Zakim Baba Yamin. Number one, Avram Avinu acquired Chochmah, but he didn't keep it for himself. Baba Yamin. He spread it out into the days of creation. He brought it to the world. In addition to that, Baba Yamin means every day of his life was utilized completely in serving Hashem, even when he had a downfall, even when he had a downer. It was still part of the upper process, and therefore it was Baba Yamin. Okay, a very interesting thing over here. The first shidduch in Chumash. I mean, obviously, Adam and Chava got married, but it doesn't say that in Chumash. Cain and Hevel got married. I mean, obviously, it says Noach, but the first shidduch making is in this Parsha. Not only that, the first shlichus, the first sending out on a mission is this week's Parsha. And it's very interesting. This coming Shabbos is the Kinnis HaShluchim. It's always Shabbos from Vorchem Kislev. And most of the time it falls out in Parshas Chayei. And the Rebbe, when he used to speak to the Shluchim, always spoke about this concept, that this Parsha teaches us the role of a Shliach, how a Shliach functions, and the purpose of the Shlichus. And that's why we find an interesting thing. Rashi says it. There's a whole story mentioned about Eliezer. He took the camels and he went to the well and he davened. Okay, a whole Megillah. Then when he finally meets Lavan and Besuel, he goes over the whole story again. He goes into every detail of the original story, the way it happened. He says it again. And Rashi says, although in the middle of the story, it was Rashi says, he quotes the Gemara that by Hashem, the stories that happened to the patriarchs was so much more precious to Hashem than the Torah, the dinim, because dinim we learn out from one word, from one letter, and here goes a whole repetition of psukim. The Torah could have said in one pasuk, Eliezer repeated to Lavan everything that happened. He doesn't do that. The Torah goes through the whole Megillah. Why is it so important? Punkt this story. Because this story is teaching us the mission. Every Jew is a shliach of Hashem. Every Jew is a messenger and an agent of Hashem to fulfill what Hashem wants us to do in this world. The mission of every Jew is to fulfill the mission of why Hashem created the world. The Medrash in the Tanchuma in Parsha Nosei says, and whoever learns Chassidus knows this, the Medrash says, why did Hashem create the world? Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu Liyaslei is part of the Rebbe Rashab added, Dira B'Tachteinu. Hashem wanted a dwelling place down here. In this low world, Hashem wanted a dwelling place. What does it mean Hashem wanted a dwelling place? Where you live, we discussed this in the past, in Tanya and other places. The way you are at home is the real you. In the street, in public, you have to act accordingly. You have to dress accordingly, speak accordingly, act accordingly, eat accordingly. At home is the real you. What does Hashem want? Hashem wants a dira, a home, meaning a place where the essence of Hashem could be revealed. Where? B'tachteinim, in the lowest of worlds. Okay? So Hashem made the world, Hashem created the world, and then every Jew, the neshama of every Jew, is sent down into this dangerous place called the body and the Yetzer Hara and the Nefesh Habamis, in all these terrible places to create a Dira B'Tachteinim. What is the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka? Yitzchak became holy at the Akedah, became a korban that represents the neshama. Where was Rivka? As the Medrash, the famous Medrash, she was Kishashana ben Achechim. Rivka was the rose amongst the thorn bushes. Rivka was this spark of godliness that went down into the low. Can you imagine Lavan and Besul? You can't get anything lower. Swindlers, liars, they wanted to kill Eliezer, all the terrible things that the Parsha talks about. So what does the shidduch between Yitzchak and Rivka represent? It represents the shidduch between godliness and world. To remove the sparks of Kedusha, remove the Rivka from all the evil that exists in the world, and bring it back, like we said before, to bring it back to Sarah's tent. To, again, the Kedusha of Sarah Imei. This is the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka. The Ayla, carbon Ayla, the Kedusha of Yitzchak Avinu, to go all the way down and get Rivka out of there. But how do we do it? So Hashem sends shluchim. Hashem sends every single Jewish man, woman, and child is this shliach to accomplish the mission. And the Torah tells us in this week's Parsha the guidelines how to do it. And if you notice, in the whole story, from the time Avram sends Eliezer until Eliezer comes back, his name is not mentioned once. The whole time it says, Avram al-Avda. So in fact, even the Medrash doesn't say who it is. We know it's Eliezer. But you don't find open Midrashim that talk a lot that there was Eliezer. The only thing the Chumash says, it was his servant. And then it says, Vayasem ha'eved es yodai, vayikach ha'eved. Everything is eved. And then, when he finally comes to make his shidduch pitch for Shatchan, what did he say to Lavan and Besuel? Eved Avram Anechi. I'm Avram's Eved. I have no entity of myself. There's no ego here involved. I am doing what needs to be done, period. And what's unique over here is here. We know that it's the shlichus what Avraham Avinu sent Eliezer. But there's a difference in definition, halacha, and reality between a shliach and an eved. The Gemara says, Yad Eved ki Yad Rabbi. The hand of an Eved is the hand of its master. There's a famous story in the Gemara Gittin, in the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story, with Marsa Bas Baitis, who was the richest woman in Yerushalayim, and it started a hunger in Yerushalayim during the destruction of Second Beis Hamikdash. And she sent out her Eved, her slave, and she told him, go buy fine flour. He came back, and he said, no, there's no fine flour. There's only middle grain flour. She said to him, go buy middle grain wheat. He went, by the time he got there was no more middle grain wheat. She said, okay, but there's cheap stuff. So she told him, go buy the cheap stuff. And by the time he got there, that was also finished. What type of goylem is that? How stupid can he be already? But the answer is, that's the definition of an Eved. An Eved has no existence of his own. The Eved's hand is the master's hand. An Eved, like a goylem, really like Yosel Goylem, there's a bunch of stories with that one. The Maral problem told him to do things and he didn't define it, he made a mess. An Eved doesn't use his own seichel. An Eved does what the master tells him to do, period. The master, Marsa Bas Baitis, said to him, go buy fine flour. He knows there's a hunger. He wasn't told to do that. He does what he was told to do, finished. A shliach, which Eliezer was also a shliach of Avraham Avinu. A shliach, the Rebbe says, yes, shliach shel adam kamaisei. A shliach is exactly like the one who sends him, but nevertheless, he has to use his own brains. There was a shliach the Rebbe sent to England many, many years ago. The head shliach, Rabbi Sudak. And the Rebbe sent him to England as one of the original shluchim that the Rebbe sent many, many years ago. And he asked the Rebbe, what am I supposed to do? So the Rebbe said, figure it out yourselves, basically. I'm sending you a mission. You're getting the strength of Avraham Avinu. You're getting the kaichas of the sender, but use your brain and figure out who, what, when, where, how to do things. Your mission is to bring godliness into that place called England. Your mission is to make people from, to make people aware of Yiddishkeit. That's your mission. A shliach has to use their own brains to figure out how, who, what, when, where. And Eved is not like that. But what we see in this Parsha, which is very unique in the mission that Hashem sends and this is every single Jew. Every Jew is sent, El Avlis Kambeisei, and he makes him swear, that's Mashbian Eisei Tihi Tzadik Valti Rasha. The Neshama is administered an oath before birth, right? The first opening line of Tanya from the Gemara Nida, that you're given the shvua, the oath, the ability. Where did that come from? Avraham Avinu's first shliach was, you have to swear that you're going to accomplish the mission. Every Jew is sworn, meaning given the ability to accomplish the mission. But in life, if you're going to mix your own ego into what your mission is, then you lose it. You're not getting the power of the sender. In the recent Rambam, there was the dinam of Me'ilah. Meil behegdish means if somebody misuses things of the Beis Hamikdash, so you have to bring a korban if it's accidental. You have to bring a korban, you have to pay additional fifth. What happens if I tell you to do something, you misuse Hegdish? So even though normally there's no shliach when it comes to sin, but the Gemara in Kedushin says over here there's a pasuk that teaches us by meila, by misusing Hegdish things of the Beis Hamikdash, you could send a shliach. So the thing is like this: if I send a shliach to misuse Hegdish, if he listens to me and does exactly what I told him to do, then I have to bring meila. I have to bring the fifth and the korban because he did it for me. But if he messes up and he doesn't do what I told him to do, then it's his problem. Because he's moel b'shlichus means if you mess up your mission from the sender, then you lose the powers of the sender. Then you're not a shliach anymore. That's the din of me'ilah. A person has to know, and this is what Eliezer said, maybe if I have a daughter, maybe Avraham Avinu said, no, that's not the mission. The mission is to go to Lavan's house and get a shidduch for Yitzchak. You have a different plan? Forget it. Eliezer had a daughter. He wanted Yitzchak to marry Eliezer's daughter. Eliezer wanted Yitzchak to marry his daughter. Avraham Avinu said, no, you're an Eved, you're from Chum, you're cursed. My son's Baruch, he's not marrying your daughter. But he tried. Avraham Avinu said no. So what did Eliezer do? He went and did exactly what Avraham Avinu did, told him to do. Which means, what is the definition of a shliach? You listen to the sender. You do what the sender wants you to do. Otherwise, you don't have the power of the sender. But another important thing, it's Eved Avraham Anechi. Who am I? I'm God's messenger. I'm nobody else. Because once we mix our own ego into it, we will not accomplish what needs to be accomplished. A person has to know they were given strengths by Hashem and powers to accomplish, and whether it's fundraising or being the kind of people, whatever it may be. But the person has to know they're Eved Avraham Anechi. It's not my powers. Hashem is giving me the power to accomplish my mission. And therefore, not once is Eliezer mentioned. By the way, it's a very interesting medrash. The medrash says that when Eliezer brought Yitzchak back with Rivka, the medrash says, das came the things are down. Avraham Avinu freed Eliezer. He freed him as a slave, and he became Eig Melech HaBasham. So Taisus asks, but this Eliezer was a tzaddik. One of the 9 people that went alive into Gan Eden was Eliezer, Eved Avraham. And Eig Melech HaBasham was this wicked king that wanted to kill Moshe Rabbeinu and Avraham Avinu and whatever. So Taisus, it's not talking about Taisus in Chumash, but it's Taisus in Shas also. He says that there were, just like every king of Egypt was called Parei, every king of Bashan, Taisus says, was called Eig. There were some good eggs and there were some bad eggs. This Eliezer became Eig Melech HaBashan, was a tzaddik. He was called Eig. There was a lot of different eggs in Bashan. Whoever the king of Bashan was, just like every king of Mitzrayim was Pari, every king of Bashan was Eig. Anyway, and that's why, by the way, the neshama, the Torah elaborates so much in the story, which explains another aspect of the story. Rashi says on the pasuk, "Va'avei hayom el ha'ayin," I came today to the well. So Rashi quotes again from the Medrash. Eliezer said, "I left today and I came today." Mikan shekotze lo yaderech. There was kfitzas haderech. Kfitzas haderech means what should have taken 5 days took 10 minutes. The day Eliezer left, that's the day he got there. It should have taken days. What's the story? Why did Hashem do a miracle? Hashem did a miracle because until then, Rivka wasn't ready to be married. She didn't hit 3 years old. A girl under 3 can't get married. They had to wait until she was 3 years old. The second Rivka turned 3. The second, the spark of Kedusha amongst the thorn bushes. The second, the Kedusha of Lavan and Besuel's house, Rivka, was ready to be taken out. No time wasted. Hashem's teaching us miracles happen to get that spark out of the evil, because you need to bring it back to Kedusha. And this is why the story, such a elaborate story with the whole Maisa, because this is the whole story of the Neshama's descent into the world. And that's what it's all about. You have to conquer this, take out the Rivka from the evil, bring the Dira B'Tachtenim, make a holy place for Hashem. But you have to have things. You have to be an Eved. You have to be completely bottled to the sender. But unlike an Eved where you don't use your own brains, a Shlich is supposed to use his own brains. Okay, there's another interesting thing. At the end of the Parsha, it says, Avram remarried Hagar. Okay? It says, Vayesef Avram vayikach isha shma Keturah. So Rashi says it was Hagar. Okay? He gave birth, okay? Zimran, Yakshan, Medan, Yishbak, and Shuach. Avram Avinu, at this time, which was 40 years after Yitzchak was born, 40 years after Yitzchak was born, he had another 6 kids. Question is, why isn't there a whole commotion about the miracle? When Yitzchak was born 40 years earlier, everybody made a big tzimis. The miracle that Avram and Sarah gave birth. And here, 40 years later, Avram Avinu is giving birth to another 6 kids. So the Ramban, interestingly, the Rambam said the miracle of Yitzchak's birth was not about Avram. And he shows many people had kids at 100. It wasn't a big deal. The big deal was Sarah. She didn't have her period anymore, and she didn't have Erech Kanoshim, and she was old, and that was the miracle for Sarah, but not for Avram. The Ramban, this is what the Ramban says. For Avram wasn't a miracle. So Memela, 40 years later, he had another 6 kids. Big deal. Big deal. But Rashi doesn't say that. Because Rashi says, before, when Avram Avinu said to Hashem, am I going to give birth at 100 years? Rashi says it was a miracle for Avram too. So if it was a miracle 40 years early, why isn't it a bigger miracle that he gave birth to 6 kids later? So again, the Rebbe explains a very interesting thing. After Yitzchak was born, the pasuk says, Heinika banim Sarah. Here. Mimi Lela, who's going to praise Avram? Heinika banim Sarah. Sarah nursed children, plural. So Rashi says it's really they bring down for the Gemara in Bar Metzia. The Gemara in Bar Metzia says, Amid Ablevi, Shaya Umis Eilam Meranin. The people were laughing, making fun of Sarah. That Sarah didn't give a birth. He brought a woman from the street. She gave birth. So what happened, Rashi says? So Rashi says, Lashon Rabbim, she said, every woman brought her kid, and Sarah nursed every single kid that was brought for her to nurse. So he saw right away it wasn't a Baba Maisa, because if she didn't give birth, she couldn't nurse. She wouldn't have milk. So Rashi says, what's the miracle? That she nursed, Heinika Ban in plural, that Sarah nursed a lot of babies. So the obvious question is, and if she just nursed Yitzchak, is not a miracle? If everybody sees, the women would see she's nursing her own baby and milk is coming, so obviously that she gave birth to him. Why did it have to be Banim? So the Rebbe explains, the pasuk says, when it says, Tzchek Asali Alakim, Medrash, Rashi calls Medrash Agoda. A lot of barren women gave birth. A lot of sick people became healthy, and everybody was answered, and there was a big joy in the world. So the Rebbe said like this. According to Rashi, Avram giving birth to Yitzchak was a miracle. But after Yitzchak was born, Hashem changed the nature of world for that period of time. Meaning, Sarah nursed a lot of kids. She had enough milk for everybody. Barren women gave birth. Sick people became healthy. So because the whole nature of the world changed, according to Rashi, then Avram's nature changed also. So after Yitzchak was born, it wasn't a miracle that he gave birth to another 6 kids, because the nature of the world changed at that time. The Ramban says for Avram Avinu was never a miracle. Okay, so according to him, it's simple. But Rashi says it was a miracle. It was a miracle that Avram gave birth. But now, so why isn't there a big commotion about the last miracle? So the Rebbe explains, according to Rashi, and a child, if he learns Rashi properly, would see this. If the world nature changed, that barren women gave birth, and sick people became healthy, and Sarah was able to nurse all those people, so then it wasn't a miracle anymore that Avram gave birth to another 6 kids, because that became the nature of the world. That became the nature. If that became the nature, then it's not a miracle. It's a very normal thing that happened, that happened in the world. Okay, now, it's almost time, but this, by the way, just one last halacha we learned out interestingly. If somebody owns an animal, the halacha is you have to feed the animal before you feed yourself. Okay, where do we learn it out from? From Krishma, from Shema Yisrael. The second chapter, it says, V'nosati Esav b'sotcha levehemtecha. Hashem says, I will give grass in the fields for your animals, v'yachalta v'savata, and then you'll eat and drink. So from there, the Gemara learns out the halacha and Sedin Shulchan Aruch, that a person has to feed their animals before they feed themselves. How about drinking? Who comes first by drinking? So we learn now from today's Parsha, okay? And then it says like this. Eliezer ran to Rivka and he says, Hashkini no, give me something to drink. So she gave him to drink, and then she said, Gam legamalecha eshet, then I'll give your camels to drink. Who did she give first? First she gave Eliezer. Then she gave the camels. So from there, the Gemara learns out that when it comes to drinking, you have to first drink and then give your animal to drink. Okay, that's it for tonight. Mitzvah Shem Wednesday night, Halacha and Tanya. Again, we're learning the dinim of Muksa. Mitzvah Shem next Monday night, again, 8 o'clock. And everybody should have a great week until the whole week. But we'll see you hopefully Wednesday.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.